I am Derek Ashong, and you are now in the stream. Today, Taiwan's upcoming elections. What will the outcome mean for the island nation's future and for U.S. China relations? Our digital producer, Ahmed Shihab Eldin, is here looking out for all of your live feedback. You can tweet him using the hashtag AJStream. Joining him on the couch today is Russell Xiao, Senior Research Fellow at Project 2049 Institute. Russell, welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Of course, this show's all about you, our community. If you have a story that you want to share, tweet it to us using the hashtag AJStream.
My name is Natalie. I'm in Tahrir Square right now. I'm in the stream.
People in Taiwan head to the polls on Saturday for a presidential election which has the potential to change the political landscape of the region. The vote pits incumbent Ma Ying-jeou of the Chinese Nationalist Party against the Democratic Progressive Party's Tsai Ing-wen. The issue of contention between the two is China. While Ma has been increasing economic ties with the communist nation since assuming power in 2008, Tsai is running on a platform that would move Taiwan towards less dependence. Let's listen to what the candidates have said regarding Taiwan's sovereignty. We will start with the incumbent, Ma.
I understand there are inexplicable fear on the part of some of our citizens, particularly the opposition, that our closer relations with the mainland might lead to their incorporation of Taiwan. But everybody has to understand that Taiwan is not like Hong Kong. We are an independent country with full sovereignty. Taiwan's future has to be decided by the 23 million Taiwanese.
And now let's hear a response from his opponent in this election, Tsai Ing-wen.
An obligation to. That is, China has an obligation to maintain a good relationship with Taiwan and to respect the feelings and the values of the people here. I mean, of course, this is international norm that China has to follow. So it's not us who have the obligation to maintain a peaceful and stable relationship with China. China has that obligation too. I mean, these are our common obligation towards the international community.
Now, the U.S. has been keeping a close eye on these elections. Although the Obama administration is maintaining an officially neutral stance, it's widely believed they prefer stability and the incumbent Ma. If Tsai were to win, increased tension across the Taiwan Strait could impact China's relations with Washington, which actually has no formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan. The U.S. is, however, obliged by law to provide the island with weapons of defense. Let's take a look at this chart, which looks at military spending. Since Beijing views Taiwan as a breakaway province, it actually spends billions of dollars annually on military forces directed at Taiwan. And in return, Taiwan does the same. Joining us now to discuss this via Skype is Ketty Chen, professor at National Taiwan University. Also with us is Michael Fonte, the Washington liaison for Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party. Welcome, both of you, to the stream.
Hi, great to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Now, Ketty, I want to start with you. What is the key issue in this election? Is it the economy or is it China?
I think the key issue for the Taiwanese people is still the economy. However, the relationship between Taiwan and China has always been one of the more sensitive issue in the elections. So I would say that number one is the economy issue, but then number two, of course, is Taiwan's relationship with China and, of course, Taiwan's relations with the United States.
Now, Michael, do you feel that Ma's policies are actually detracting from Taiwan's sovereignty, as some people have claimed?
Well, President Ma has oftentimes, most of the time when he talks about the Republic of China's sovereignty, not just Taiwan. And it's an important distinction because he feels that the ROC Constitution includes a, quotes, mainland region and a Taiwan region, and that therefore there is some umbrella of one China with which he can then have conversations with people on the Chinese side. The DPP does not accept that. For the DPP, Taiwan includes Taiwan, the Penghu, and the offshore islands, and that's it. It doesn't have a mainland region. So there's a fundamental difference in the way the two parties view Taiwan and its relationship to China. This is one of those issues that comes up regularly in the election campaigns.
Okay, let's get some comments from our community.
Well, it's interesting, we asked our community, whether Taiwan is in fact independent, and people are saying, for example, we have Kixis here saying on Twitter, maybe it's just me, but I've already been thinking of Taiwan as independent from China for a long time. We even have a septic on Twitter saying Taiwan is independent de facto. We can't shout it out simply because there is a knife against our throat put by China. So Russell, to you, I mean, obviously, economically and in terms of culturally even, there is an independence, but we've seen in recent years under Ma's government that it's become, China's become Taiwan's biggest trading partner. So is it really independent?
Well, de facto, yes, it is independent, but there is growing economic interdependence between Taiwan and China, which the pace has increased under the current administration under Ma Ying-jeou. And now, whether or not that leads to political integration, however, remains to be seen. I think that if you look in terms of public opinion polls in Taiwan from 2008, which is when the Ma administration came into power, where there was a 82.6% respondents of a Taiwanese government poll saying that they prefer the maintenance of the status quo. And then versus also another poll done in 2011 where the respondents actually said that there was a 87.6%, which was about a 5% increase in the number of respondents preferring the status quo. So the implication that economic interdependence will lead to political integration has not been realized in the past 4 years. And I suspect that absent a sort of a major stirring of the pot, wherein that the Chinese government may perhaps, like it did in 1996, fire missiles over the Taiwan Strait, or make very fiery rhetorics that to try to dissuade the Taiwanese voters away from what is seen as a provocative measures from the opposition candidate, that this trend will continue, meaning that there will be an increasing number of people who prefer the status quo. And the status quo is the fact that Taiwan right now, under its current constitutional framework, exists as an independent sovereign state.
So, Katie, I want to get your thoughts on this issue of status quo, because as Michael had intimated, the KMT and DPP have very different ideas about China. One party looking at one China with kind of, I guess, Taiwan as the rightful leadership, and the other seeing Taiwan as a truly independent entity. Are either of these realistic in all honesty?
I think from the KMT's perspective, what the KMT has been insisting on is that negotiation between Taiwan and China has to be based on the 1992 consensus. However, the problem with the 1992 consensus is that it's a consensus that has never been put on paper. And this is where both sides of the PRC and of course Taiwan has gotten into the discussion of what is actually the 1992 consensus. According to President Ma of the National Chinese Party, it is one China, two different interpretation. However, one of the problem with the consensus is that with the People's Republic, they only adhere to the one China policy, and the people from the leadership from the PRC has never mentioned anything about the two interpretation. So at the same time, when the KMT does not necessarily say in this campaign that it is a legitimate government of all China, the KMT party charter does say that the KMT is the rightful leader of China. It's not too far-fetched for the party, but then at the same time, if you really watch the campaign rhetoric of the KMT right now, the governing of all China, KMT being the rightful leader of China, is never mentioned because the issue is just that sensitive.
So, Michael, on this question of the sensitivities, I mean, how long can this status quo realistically continue?
Well, good question. I mean, the Chinese are worried, obviously, on their side, that the more the status quo of in fact, de facto independence and separation continues, that it will lead to permanent separation. I think what's important to point out is that with President Ma's one China umbrella, he accepts some fundamental unification way down the road, wherever it is. The DPP says, no, Taiwan's a democratic society now. It's a democratic country. We have to leave all options open. That may be unification if the people want it. I was in Taipei just recently. I was at the major rally of the DPP, and Dr. Tsai Ing-wen said very forcefully, he says, the DPP doesn't own Taiwan, the KMT doesn't own Taiwan, it's the people of Taiwan who own Taiwan, and they have the right to make a decision about the future, whenever that may happen. So I think that's a very important distinction, and the Chinese aren't happy with that, but I think it leaves open all kinds of possibilities where I do believe that under President Ma's umbrella, there's only one future possibility, that's unification. And that's not acceptable, as Russell has already pointed out, to the majority of the people in Taiwan.
Okay, so now I want to actually bring this point to you, Russell, because we see a tweet from @KKang saying that as a democracy, Taiwan deserves to be recognized by quote-unquote freedom-loving countries like the U.S. And she's using the hashtag hypocrisy. Is there a fundamental hypocrisy in U.S. policy towards Taiwan?
Well, I mean, the basis of U.S.-Taiwan relation stems from the 1979 Taiwan's Relations Act, under which, the Taiwan de facto has de facto diplomatic relations with Taiwan. It is also guided by a one China principle, which Washington has never defined what that one China means, meaning that it could be the Republic of China, or which is Taiwan, or it could be the People's Republic of China. It is a very complex relationship that Taiwan and that the United States has to manage in terms of cross-strait relationship. On the one hand, of course, Taiwan as it democratized, from the 1970s, 80s onwards, it makes it important as an important partner for the United States, as well as a symbol of U.S. credibility in the Asia-Pacific region. I think that actually that the United States should acknowledge an objective reality, which is the fact that Taiwan, under its current constitutional framework, exists as an independent and sovereign state. Mm-hmm. However, I mean, there will be, and it would be consistent under its one China principle. However, though, I think that this has always been a tug and pull between the United States and China. China has been, in recent years, trying to step up pressure on Washington to take a step back on living up to its commitment under the TRA, which actually, as you understand the letter of the TRA, obligates the United States to sell defensive arms to Taiwan and maintain the capacity in which to defend against any kind of military coercion on the part of the Chinese government to settle this other than through peaceful means. And so if there is a formal acknowledgement or diplomatic relations with Taiwan, what would happen to the Taiwan's Relations Act? Would that necessarily be in Taiwan's interest? Would that actually be in U.S. interest? These are all important questions that the United States will have to consider. Clearly, I think as a democracy, Taiwan deserves U.S. support and should have U.S. support. But China is also growing as large.
Could come at a very heavy price with U.S. China relations.
Could potentially.
Let's get some more comments from the community.
On that note, a lot of the comments from our community actually do deal with this delicate balancing act that the U.S., some people are describing the U.S. has to do. We have Sarah Rashid on Twitter saying, because of Taiwan and China's tense relations and the U.S. alliance to both Taiwan and China, the U.S. will play the middleman, as we've been discussing, and keep tensions from rising to action. She goes on to say, if it came down to it, though, the U.S. is way more in debt to China than Taiwan and would therefore side with China on any decisions. Probably she's meaning even economically in debt. I think it's over $1 trillion in debt that China holds. And on that same note, this is a question perhaps to you, Michael, you could answer from Lawrence Yen that came in. It's a video question. Let's take a listen.
Taiwan is a small country, but it is an important trade partner for the U.S. How do you think the result of the Taiwanese elections will affect the U.S. economy?
Well, I think it's very important to underscore the fact that U.S. policy is pretty unique about Taiwan. We follow a one China policy as opposed to the Chinese one China principle. The Chinese believe Taiwan's part of China, period. The U.S. says we only acknowledge that position. We think that sovereignty of Taiwan is undetermined, and there should be a future discussion between the two sides to come to some mutually acceptable, peaceful resolution. Now, I think that what's very important is that Taiwan, because of this strange position it's in, has been cut out of a lot of the free trade agreements that have happened in East Asia. President Ma has signed an economic framework, cooperation framework agreement with China, but haven't been able to break out of that linkage into other connections. So I think this so-called Trans-Pacific partnership with the United States is trying to forge, which is a larger regional economic grouping, would be in everyone's interest in the region, including China's, and it would help Taiwan be integrated. I think with the Tsai Ing-wen administration, instead of leaning so much towards China as President Ma has, I think that she would be involved in trying to direct Taiwan's attention more to the United States, both on the security but also on the economic front. And I think that would be an important continued connection which we currently have. Taiwan is one of our biggest trading partners, it's true, but we need to continue to deepen that.
Now, let me go to Katie. And I do want to clarify for our viewers, Michael, that you are the liaison for the DPP, which is Tsai, the opposition party.
That's correct.
That's correct. So, Katie, let's come to you then. We know that there's going to be a transition of power. Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao will be transitioning, as will President Hu Jintao. What do you think will be the implications of that for relations with China? Would there be potentially an interest by the new leadership to take a strong stance to show that there is no bend on their Taiwan policy?
I think the recent or the upcoming transfer of power of China, I don't necessarily think that China will take a more stronger stance to trying to bring Taiwan in, because internally the Chinese leadership needs to be able to figure out how to sustain itself and how to, let's say, playing musical chair. So in the meantime, I see the relations with Taiwan and China remain pretty steady at the moment. Whether or not China takes a stronger stand against bringing or trying to absorb Taiwan into to China, I think it remains to be seen. So as of now, I don't really see the relations between Taiwan and China change that much, even with the transfer.
Let's get
If I may, there's
Go ahead,
one point of this. There is a question that a lot of people in the think tank world here in Washington and the administration worry about. That is, current Chinese President Hu Jintao has made a big deal of his legacy being keeping Taiwan close, not necessarily unifying, but not allowing it to drift away. And if Dr. Tsai wins this election, there are some people who are worried that it will look like his legacy has been damaged, et cetera. And will that mean that he's got another 6 months to go after she gets inaugurated? There'll be heavier pressure. So there's some questions there about what the Chinese response might be.
Well, thank you. You know, it's always interesting to hear the perspective within, think tanks and inside circles within the government. But we also put out a question to people within Taiwan, and we have from David on Formosa. He's kind of outlining for us what the electorate views, in his opinion, as the key issues. He says the key issues are, 1, protecting Taiwan's democracy and existing independence, and 2, economic and social justice and addressing inequality. And it's interesting because another tweet from Anna Momi says that Tsai Ing-wen is the first Taiwan candidate setting economic priority ahead of China's relations. So, maybe to you, Katie, do you think that even though she's willing to do business with China, that perhaps by saying that it has to be done on Taiwan's terms, that will resonate with the wide majority of the electorate?
The electorate? I think the electorate is keen on the idea if, like Russell has already pointed out, the majority of the people on Taiwan really wants a friendly relationship with China, but at the same time, they want Taiwan to remain separate from China. So if Chairman Tsai Ing-wen wants to put economics with China as priority, and she doesn't reject the fact that Taiwan needs to continue to do business with China while remain independent. I think that resonates with the electorate pretty well, knowing that the criticism that President Ma is suffering right now is he's pushing Taiwan closer towards China with the 16 agreements that he had signed and of course, as Michael has mentioned, the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement that he has signed with China. So there's this comparison between Tsai Ing-wen and Ma Ying-jeou. So as you can see, both candidates are stealingly and neck to neck popular with the electorate. So that kind of reflects the constituents' favor to Tsai Ing-wen.
Ketty, Michael, and Russell, I want to ask you to hold your thoughts because we specifically want to dive deeper into the internal economic dynamics within the country and what's at stake there. Before we do that, we want to look at some of the leads that the stream has been following, including a special contribution from one of our community members.
Thanks, Derek. Well, today one of our viewers sent us a short report from Occupy DC in Washington. Omar Sharif used 2 iPhones and an iPad to record this video about the Occupy movement. Take a look.
So, some of the Occupy movements are starting to disband, be it forcefully or willingly. Do you think the movement is starting to lose its momentum?
Personally, at this point, I feel that there's almost nothing that could be done to cause the movement to lose momentum. We've really changed the political dialogue going on in our country to the point where people that previously didn't care at all about politics are much more willing to discuss it beyond red and blue, left and right, and really talk about the specific issues that they care about within politics.
Okay. What are the goals of the Occupy movement for 2012, especially since it's an election year?
Right now, there's no real focus on any of the election. It's still on public relations with the people. Occupy very much is about restoring the power of democracy to the people, not our representatives. That being said, we're continually petitioning our politicians to represent us better, encouraging the the repeal of the Citizens United ruling, and to re-examine what lobbying rules we have in place.
Do you feel like the movement is still as strong as it was in the beginning, with all the challenges, be it the weather or maybe some of the actions taking place in other cities?
I think we are on a bit of a hiatus until spring simply because of the weather and a bit of outside influence, but definitely the members of the movement that are still here are just as dedicated as the day they first came out.
Well, thanks for that, Ahmad. It's pretty impressive what you can do with just 2 phones and a tablet. And here at the stream, remember, we always love to get these viewer-generated content, so keep sending it our way. Now let's quickly get to our first lead. Developers in Israel have created a high-tech glove that translates sign language into text. Now this video right here shows you that the glove connects to Android smartphones and uses finger sensors to measure speed and tilt in order to translate hand signs. The creators hope to offer a simple and portable way for those not fluent in sign language to communicate with the hearing impaired. And from South Korea, Twitter user @SeoulDecadence was arrested on Tuesday for retweeting messages from an official North Korean Twitter account. Now here's a photo circulating on Twitter of Jung-gun Park in custody. He was charged with violating South Korea's National Security Act, which was enacted in 1948 in order to counter communist infiltration from the North. Stream community member @LiveJ, it's worth mentioning, created a storify, as you can see right here, that aggregates commentary on that particular detention. And you can find that and our other stream leads on our website by visiting stream.aljazeera.com/leads. Vote up the stories you want, as always, and you could see it on a future show. Derek?
Thank you, Ahmed. That is some very cool stuff, particularly that sign language glove. I wonder how long it will take for something like that to hit the market.
Yeah, either the market or, the military. They'll put it to use, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm absolutely certain of that. Russell, it's been a pleasure having you here. We really appreciate it. We're going to continue the conversation. Ahmed, thank you for getting our community involved, and thank you, our community, for being with us. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the internal economic dynamics within Taiwan. Some have argued that the incumbent president has been a friend of the wealthy and not of the common person. We've been seeing these similar arguments around the world. We want to know what implications they have right there. Stay with us at stream.aljazeera.com and tweet us using the hashtag AJStream. As always, we will see you online. Welcome to the Post Show. We are talking about the upcoming Taiwanese elections on Saturday. I want to come to you, Russell, before we get back to our two guests from Skype. Now, people have been, at least in the research that we've done thus far, we've seen a somewhat of a more populist tone from the opposition, from the DPP, Tsai Ing-wen. And it seems that there is this accusation that the incumbent president is a friend of the wealthy. And yet we've seen economic growth in Taiwan and increased trade, revenue from tourism, all kinds of things growing, at least seeming to go in the right direction there. Is there a divergence in where that money goes to? Is there truly an increased gap between the wealthy and the poor in Taiwan?
Well, I think that actually ties into a larger and I think a more sort of a topic that I think ties into it's reflected in this election right now, which is the fact that it is becoming less and less about independence or unification and more issues oriented. And this is interesting by comparison to the previous election where ethnic distinction or like independence or unification or ethnic identity was more forefront in terms of the election results or how people were mobilized in order to vote. This is, I think, a promising sign of the democratic consolidation in Taiwan's political process, wherein that issues become at the forefront and it's less about sort of independence or unification. I think this counters the argument that I think some people are making about these inevitabilities if either political party wins in this election. If the KMT wins, Taiwan will move inevitably towards unification, or if the DPP wins, it will be on an inseparable path towards independence. It is not about independence or unification anymore. The people prefer the status quo, and I think that this is reflected in terms of the public opinion there. And the issues that concerns Taiwan's electorate, and Ketty being in Taiwan right now perhaps will have a better feel for the pulse of the Taiwanese electorate. But my sense is that yes, there are concerns about the signing of the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement between Taiwan and China, that this benefits only the larger conglomerates or the more wealthy class who have the sort of investments that they can make into mainland China and benefit from more closer economic cooperation. And this is also part of I think a growing sense of maybe disenfranchisement from the process, and so therefore I think this is a natural outgrowth of Taiwan's democratic process, than a sort of political posturing on the part of the opposition candidate.
Well, let's get Ketty's thought. Actually, we've lost Ketty. We're going to take a minute to get her back, but I think that this is interesting. We saw this headline, which was also tweeted to us from Kei Kiang, and it says that Taiwan's top election issue, the rich earn 6 times more than the poor. By American standards, that seems fairly only 6 times more than the poor. I mean, that seems fairly equitable, but at the same time, obviously, it's raised an issue for some people. Do you think that that question of the wealth divide is going to be a crucial one?
Yes, it will be. It will be, and increasingly so, if there is not some kind of redistribution of wealth. And the opposition candidate, Tsai Ing-wen, has made that an issue in terms of her political platform in order to subsidize more of the local industries because of concerns of a hollowing out of Taiwan's industries when they go over to China, when they compete in China. That because the sheer size of China's market and as well as its sort of size of its industrial bases, that this will outweigh and overwhelm Taiwan's industries. And
so we've actually got Ketty back. Ketty, we know you're on the ground in Taiwan. Talk to us a little bit about the economic considerations that voters will be thinking about come Saturday.
I guess there are several economic considerations that the voters are paying close attention to. Number one is the pricing of everything. For example, today I was riding 2 cabs, and both cab drivers complain about the raising gas prices and the rising of everyday products. And also the people on Taiwan is worried about the rising housing prices, the gap between the rich and the poor, very similar to what the United States citizens are talking about and worrying. right now. So that's one of the keen issues that people have been talking about. That's the chatters that I hear on the ground here.
That's amazing. Let's get some more comments from our community, maybe some questions for Michael as well.
Yeah, Michael, this is actually for you. You know, lots of people on Twitter are raising not just issues within the election, but the election itself as a security issue. Hakatha on Twitter saying Taiwan has been alert to election violence since a mysterious shooting in 2004. And then we also have this tweet from A. Locke saying, police found a gun near Tsai's motorcade, reminiscent of past attempts, perhaps alluding to the 2004 incident, that may have changed the outcome of the election. Are you familiar with this, working on the DPP party, and do you have any concerns about the security in the election?
Yes, the concerns are real about security. It wasn't only in 2004, but last year there were elections for municipalities, and there was a shooting incident which involved a KMT member. Actually, the former honorary chair of the KMT's son was shot, and a lot of people feel that generated a lot of support votes for KMT candidates. So both sides of this have experienced some violence, and there is concern. If you see shots of Dr. Tsai going around campaigning, you'll see lots of security around her. So the DPP certainly hopes that there's no such incidents. And if there are any incidents, they are downplayed so they're not create a kind of an uproar of who did this, because the immediate yelling that came out of certain sectors of the blue camp, the KMT camp, was that the DPP was responsible for the shooting in last year, 2011. Anyhow, I think that these are important issues, but I don't think that's going to be a real factor. I do think, getting back to the initial question about the economy, Dr. Tsai's key posters all talk about fairness and justice, Gongbang and Zhengyi. And I think those are the two issues. The Gini coefficient continues to get worse in Taiwan, stagnant wages for middle class, unemployment. There's a lot of issues that's similar to what we are experiencing in the United States because, and she has been very clear about the impact of globalization, the downside impact of globalization. So these are issues which affect the body politic at large in Taiwan, but particularly the southern half of Taiwan, which is heavily DPP oriented.
Russell, a final question.
Mm-hmm.
Depending upon who wins this election, what should we expect to see as the primary difference in the status of Taiwan, whether economically or its foreign relations? What would be the primary difference between the effect of the policies of Ma or Tsai?
Well, I think that if the opposition candidate wins, Tsai Ing-wen wins, she has extended an olive branch already to the Beijing government, that she will engage them and will try to, in her efforts, try to more continuity than change. I think that will be my takeaway with that. However, I think the Beijing administration right now has adopted a wait-and-see approach to what will happen. And in terms of my reading, of some of the Chinese scholars and academics that have commented on Taiwan's election, actually they have taken a far more reserved and far less alarmed position on Taiwan's election, suggesting to me that there is a sense of stability or confidence, if you will, in China, that either political party could manage the relationship. And then I would like to also point out that Ketty made a very important point, which is that looking into 2012, the Chinese leadership will have a lot more things to worry about internally than they do actually about cross-strait relations, I think, so that will be some stability there in that sense that they will be more concerned about, of course, the smooth transition process in the next party Congress, and also as well as waiting to see if Tsai Ing-wen will deliver on their promises to continue on with the policies that had been enacted under the current KMT administration, but perhaps that there will be a process in which the DPP, if they win, will review some of the measures and whether or not they will be, if that is consistent with the consensus-based approach that they have adopted as their mechanism to engage Beijing.
Well, it's interesting. I just wanted to jump in because you were talking about the differences, and it's often difficult to really visualize them or understand them, especially if this is a new topic. So we have this tweet from Kei Kiang saying the difference between Ma and Tsai, and it's actually a link to a Tumblr page called Letters from Taiwan. I just want to share this with our audience. So, just to give you a sense of what this is, if I scroll down, it says the difference between Ma and Tsai, and presumably these are quotes. Right here, we have Ma saying it's about growing a big business, and Tsai saying it's about growing a diverse and sustainable economy. Ma saying it's about going to the world through China. Tsai saying it's about going to China through the world. So this goes on and on. We'll definitely be tweeting this out, a nice comparison of their policies.
Absolutely. Well, on that point, I want to thank all of you, Kedi, Michael, Russell, and thank you, Ahmed, once again, as always. Thank you, our community. Remember, the conversation continues all day online. Use the hashtag AJStream to continue to be in touch with us on this topic and others. As always, we will see you online.